Well, as we are in the middle of graduation season, everybody thinking about that next job. And one of the components that they will be dealing with as we move forward is the impact that artificial intelligence is having and will have down the road. Pleasure to be joined by Peter Cappelli, management professor here at the Wharton School. Peter, great to talk again. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Let me start with this time of the year and you having been at Wharton so long. In the conversations you have with students, what is kind of the expectation you give of them of what they're going into?
Well, I mean, this won't surprise anybody. There's just tons of uncertainty, right? And uh, the reality of AI is lagging, or perception is lagging the reality by a lot. So I've been spending a fair bit of time just trying to talk to organizations that have actually introduced AI, as opposed to people who are just talking about what it will do.
Right.
And, the gap is just enormous. I mean, one of the things that you learn from even looking from survey data is there's not nearly as much effort to really introduce AI into the work stream of organizations as you would think, that it's mainly people using it at their desk to draft better memos and that sort of stuff. But they're not taking over tasks, except for that simple stuff that you would do, like, write letters or answer email or something, or summarize documents, right?
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of that.
Yeah.
But really putting it into the workplace where it would take over tasks, we're not seeing that. The evidence about it taking over jobs, there's really like no good evidence of that, and lots of
Yeah.
evidence that it's just not happening. Here's the latest one I just saw, and that is survey of chief financial officers who you would think might have an incentive to exaggerate this because Wall Street likes the idea that you would
Right.
perhaps,
Right.
and they report that AI has reduced jobs by 0.4%. So 0.4%.
Yeah.
Much.
And unfortunately, it's become the story that is kind of the hot button topic out there. And so when you hear a company cut jobs and there is something attached to it saying, well, it's because of the advent of AI, how do you respond to that?
Well, there have been sort of three stages of the explanations, right? And I don't think any of them have been true, to be honest. The first was, that that AI has is reducing our headcount.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, you discover, and if you ask, has it actually taken over jobs? The answer there has been no, right?
Yep.
And then the second one was Amazon in particular was very upfront about this with its 14,000 layoffs. We anticipate that it will take over jobs, which, if you think about it, is kind of a very bizarre thing that you would cut jobs now in anticipation that eventually they'll be taken over. So where's the work going to get done, right?
Right. Right.
Well, that didn't sound right either. The thing we have heard now is a third explanation, and that is that the layoffs are because we need to save money to invest in AI, right?
Yeah.
And Mark Zuckerberg said this about Meta the other day, quite literally, and you're hearing it elsewhere as well. So I did a little look into that and whether that sounds credible, and just run it through for you a little bit. Most of the big tech companies that are making these kind of arguments, they've got over $100 billion in cash or so. They're cash generators, right?
Yeah.
And they've got, market cap of 3-4 trillion dollars. I mean, they're enormously valuable companies. And they're talking about making big investments, over $100 billion of investments in AI. If you ask the investment community and the analysts, where's the money coming from? They say it's going to come from their revenues, which are at record levels.
Yeah.
And then if you look at what you're going to save from these layoffs, some estimates, you lay off 10,000 managers, you might save $2 billion. 1 billion has got to go to basically help them leave, the costs
Yeah.
of severance and things. So
Yeah.
upfront, you're saving $1 billion on an investment of 100 billion, where you've already got $100 billion in cash sitting around. Come on. I mean,
It's not that big a thing. Yeah.
it's just a drop in the bucket. And the only reason it is happening is if you believe you really didn't need these people in the first place, right?
Right.
And I think that's the reality. And now why that is a much more complicated question.
So
And
then is some of this then potentially still a little bit of a leftover from the pandemic time when we saw companies adding bodies and adding bodies and adding bodies, and they kept people on to a certain point, and maybe now is this point where they're starting to trim a little bit.
ooh, that's a really good point. And I just was trying to float that argument to some people. I was at a conference of HR people yesterday, and we were trying to figure out why are these cuts happening now? Because business is booming, right? I
Yeah,
mean, none of these companies are arguing we're in any financial trouble.
yeah,
And there was an undercurrent of kind of belief that what was going on here was kind of payback because it's not just that we're getting layoffs. It's the pushing people to come back to the office. It's squeezing budgets. You may have seen this story about Deloitte and Zillow and some other companies cutting paid time off days in the middle of, what is a business boom. And so, why is that? And that sounds like a credible explanation, at least to a lot of HR people.
but going back to what you were talking about before about AI, it's obvious from so many people using AI in their regular life, the benefit that it can provide to a lot of those, as you said, smaller tasks to be able to make sure that you're able to get work done faster and cleaner. And that's going to be the benefit for companies moving forward in that their profitability is going to rise over the course of time because things are moving smoother.
Yeah, I think to the extent to which it raises productivity and saves you some time, which translates into productivity increase. This is exactly what an economy wants to happen, right? We've
Yeah.
gone a very long time with pretty low increases in national productivity, and this is exactly what we would like to see. What I can tell you, we're looking at these companies that introduce it, though, is that it takes a lot of effort to put these tools into the workflow. It's a lot
Right.
of organization change stuff. It requires a lot of help from your employees. If even in white collar jobs, the idea that you're just going to pop an AI agent into it, or you can
Yeah.
sprinkle it like pixie dust over the organization, you got to figure out where to do it. You've got to get those employees to help you train even a ChatGPT like instrument so that it's giving you the answers that really are useful. You got to check it to make sure it's not giving you stuff that's dumb. Every time you change the question a little bit, you got to be checking that stuff. So you do need employees' help on this. And if you're not getting it, it's not going to work very well. Right.
What does that mean then for the younger generation coming into the workforce? I think what you're basically saying is if you're more AI proficient, the better off you're going to be as you move forward here.
Well, I think there's a couple of myths about that. The first is in none of these places did I see that there was any skill involved in using AI tools.
Right.
Right? I mean, the reason that they're so prolific is they're so easy to use.
Yeah.
What you do have a shortfall in is on the management side. This is really organization change stuff. And one of the things we've heard on the tech consulting side is their need and their willingness now to bring in management consultant help to try to get them to figure out how to make this stuff work. There's another thing that also I'm seeing fairly often and now, and that is that, this notion that the simple jobs will all go away because AI can take them over is not looking true. And the reason for that is because to take over simple jobs, the first point is it doesn't save you much money.
Right.
Simple jobs don't pay much. So if you eliminate a few minimum wage workers, you're not saving a lot of money. And often the tools that you need to take over simple jobs, which are kind of yes, no jobs, is this an application? Is this an appeal? Stack them, that sort of stuff. That requires machine learning tools, and those are quite expensive to build.
Right.
And if you're the CFOs, we're starting to hear CFOs now no longer writing a blank check for AI stuff on the hope that it will cut headcount, right? And so now they're saying, okay, show us what the return is really going to be here. The complication there is the costs are all up front. And the
Yeah.
benefits come later on with increased productivity, but that might be years down the road. And it's really a burden to get an ROI that's going to be reasonable. If you're front loading costs, benefits come years later.
Especially if you're talking about the difference in years and in seeing the benefit being 10 or 20 years down the road, to take that hit at the front end of your statement and not see it for such a long period of time.
Oh, yeah. I think in this case, you might see it in 2, 3 years, something like that.
Right.
Start to see it. But, the upfront cost can be really big, especially if you're including the costs of organizational change and the time and effort to try to get these things to work. It's sometimes really hard. So I think the idea that all simple jobs will be automated, it's not looking like that. In fact, the big opportunity is really in white collar work.
Yeah.
It's not so much in frontline work.
Right, and I think the assumption was, and I'll finish up on this, is that this was going to have a greater impact on blue collar jobs, especially ones that had that connection with the public. But for many companies, they want that still. They need to have that connection with the public.
Yeah.
Having that human being,
Yeah. Yeah.
a conversation, it's valuable, or else they're going to lose customers.
Yeah, wait staff are not going away, right? And
Yeah,
and store owners, they still need clerks and those sorts of jobs. I think one of the reasons there is so much panic about this AI stuff is precisely because it had the possibility to affect middle class jobs and college graduate jobs. And I think what we are seeing is the slow adjustment of employers to realize that, okay, maybe AI, like in consulting or accounting, can take over the tasks that we initially had college graduates do. And at first they said, okay, well, we don't need these people. And then somebody maybe smarter thought, okay, if you don't hire people this year, you won't have any 2-year veterans next year.
right,
And
right.
why don't we just give them more to do now? So AI can do a lot of these things. All right, have them do the AI tasks, manage those, and let's give them some smarter things to do, right? And that's what we're seeing the consulting companies have already come around to doing.
Peter, always great to talk with you and get your insight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan. Nice to see you.
Always great to see you as well. Peter Cappelli, management professor here at the Wharton School.